If you're having trouble hitting steel or concrete around windows when you're trying to fit curtains or blinds, you're not alone. Today I'm going to show you what you're hitting and how to get around it. It's sort of ironic and quite often upsetting that the one area where you want a really good fixing to be able to hang heavy curtains and blinds around a window is probably the most reinforced area of any house. And it's not surprising really. All this brick and block above a big opening like this has to be kept up with something fairly substantial. And engineers and architects over the years have managed to design lintels to the point where they sit in seamlessly, hidden in the fabric of any building, to the point that the average DIYer won't even cross their mind that this part of the wall is any different to anywhere else in the house until they have to drill a hole. So this is the point where normally there's lots of swearing and regret over your choice of DIY project. You can always try to get some sympathy from your wife, explaining to her that your house is completely different and harder than every other house. But just remember, she still wants those curtains up, so any sympathy is going to be fairly short-lived. So how do we solve this? Well, the first thing we need to do is to understand what sort of lintel we've got, whether it's concrete or steel. Now, there may be a clue on that on your drill bit, because if the drill bit, you've got dark dust coming down, the chances are it's a concrete lintel. And if you've been trying for some time, you may even find some magnetized iron filings on the end of the bit, which will tell you it's a steel lintel. The other thing you can do is just get something that's made out of metal, put it in the hole and just listen to what it sounds like. I can hear metal on metal, so that's a steel lintel. So it's really important to start with to work out what material you're dealing with. If you're dealing with a concrete lintel, then it's essentially you've got a large lump of concrete going across the top of the window, extending either side, both on the soffit and on the face, exactly where you really want to hang a curtain rail. And obviously the problem is that it's going to be hard. But concrete that they make lintels out of is first of all high strength concrete, and secondly concrete naturally gains strength with age. So if you're in a property that's 40 or 50 years old, that concrete lintel is going to be absolutely solid, a bit like stone, and the chances of drilling through it with a small drill like this is very slim. Now the solution is still to drill a hole. You've got no way of getting around that, but it is possible to drill through concrete lintels, but you're going to have to use an SDS drill. Now these are not only more powerful, but they actually drill and they hammer the concrete in a totally different way. If you want to know how that works, go and see my video why every DIYer should own an SDS drill, and that'll explain everything to you. So the solution is to beg, borrow or steal an SDS drill, and you will get through that concrete a lot more successfully and be able to fix into it. Now if you've got a steel lintel, then you've got a different set of problems, and the problems are generally that when a DIYer hits steel, first of all, it's even harder than concrete, and that's a bit challenging. But mainly, they can't even understand what they're hitting. They don't know whether that steel is 1mm thick or 20mm thick, and they can't even visualize which way it's running or where it's going. But fear not. Obviously, there is a solution to this, and it's not as difficult as people think. So let's go to the workshop where I'll be able to show you exactly what we're dealing with here and the solution. Yes, it's mock-up time again, and this is my window. I should have said window opening. I have no window in it at all, but we don't need a window to show you how this lintel works. So I put together this mock-up in the same way as we tend to build houses these days in the UK, and that is with an inside skin of blockwork. That's the inside of the building with your plasterboard, and then a cavity that's full of insulation. I've just left the insulation out of this one, and an outside skin of blockwork or brickwork, depending on the house. Mine is blockwork with render on the outside, but probably more typical is brickwork and facing brickwork, and that's what makes it look like a brick house. Now, if you've got this type of arrangement, any openings in the house, like doors and windows, are going to use a cavity tray type metal lintel, and it looks like this. And it's essentially an upside down U-shaped piece of steel with a couple of wings coming out horizontally that support the brick or the block above the void and the opening. And it's a U-shape like this that really gives it its strength and means that it can actually support everything above it. And it's made out of galvanized steel so it doesn't rust. And the one I've got here is just over 2mm thick. So with the plasterboard taken off, you can just about see the edge of the lintel here, and in real life it's embedded in the mortar course between these two blocks. But the interesting part is in the opening. So if you didn't have any plasterboard in your house, you'd actually see the metal of the underside of this lintel. And as an aside, you can always tell which side of the lintel goes in and out, because they've always got these cutouts and the notches, and that's always on the inside. So when you actually stick plasterboard to it, it's actually got a key there for the plasterboard to bond. So we don't see this because it's end boarded, and this is exactly what I've done here. So back to exactly the same situation as where I was drilling 5 minutes ago inside the house, where I've got plasterboard on the soffit of the window opening, and as I drill into there very quickly you come across steel. And in reality it's quite common to have a gap between your plasterboard and the steel. In my example here I've got a gap of maybe 1 or 2mm. I've just used a small amount of plaster to stick this board under the soffit here. In real life you can quite easily have a gap of 8 to 10mm between these two. Now if you have that, there is a possibility you could get a fixing in just to the plasterboard. But if you're going to do that, just be aware that essentially you're loading the plasterboard and you're trying to pull it off the lintel where it's stuck. So if you're going to put a lot of load onto it, just be aware that that may fail at some point, and it's not really the best fixing. So to get a really good fixing, it's inevitable that we're going to have to drill through the plasterboard and the steel, which isn't as difficult as a lot of people think, as long as you know how, which I'll show you after this quick message from our sponsor today, who is ITS, for all the tools you need. The ITS sale is now on between today, the 9th of September, until the 26th of September, with some of the biggest savings ever on power tools, hand tools, workwear, and a lot more. And as usual, I've been looking through the sale items, and there's a couple of things I really quite like. Firstly, this DeWalt impact driver. It's the 887 impact driver body for £49.99 plus VAT. That's £60 for an impact driver, which I think is a great deal. And something else that I would particularly like is this DeWalt cordless SDS drill. And this is the 18 volt XR version, which matches all my other tools. And for £145 plus VAT, that is a really attractive piece of kit. And this would be perfect for drilling through hard concrete lintels. You see what I did there? Quite topical. But personally, to have a cordless SDS drill is probably my next big investment. Also, for every day of the sale, there's also going to be a £1 deal, a bit like these chisels, that changes every day. And as usual, there's free next day delivery if you spend over £100. So go and have a look at the website. There's a huge amount of products on offer. And as usual, if you spend more than £60 and put in my code, Proper DIY, you'll be able to get this, which is a free goodie bag with your first order. Which reminds me, I've never claimed mine, but if I bought a cordless SDS drill, So I've gone through the plasterboard and hit something very hard. I think it's steel. If I just put this in, yeah, I can hear that is steel. So we need to drill through this steel. Well, there's a couple of tips here that I want to give you. First of all, the type of drill bit to use is obviously an HSS steel drill bit, but I would highly recommend going from a branded make. I'm using Bosch here. I don't think it necessarily needs to be Bosch, but I would highly recommend steering clear from cheap drill bits that you get in cheap shops and markets. You know, the sort of drill bits that would struggle to get through wood, let alone steel. So first of all, get yourself a decent set of drill bits. I'm going to use a 6mm drill, which matches the 6mm drill that I used for the masonry. Lots of people like to drill something small to start with as a pilot hole and then get bigger. I must admit, I've found just going for something like 6mm to be just as easy as well. Let's get this into the chuck, and then I'll give you my top tip, number 2. The secret to drilling into steel is to drill slowly with a lot of force. And this is where we end up with our next challenge, because to drill into a soffit like this, which by definition is normally above your head, with the required force prolonged enough for this to start cutting into steel successfully, is almost impossible. You can start and you can maybe do it for a few seconds, but very quickly you start to tire, and it's impossible to really push hard enough for this to cut successfully. So what we need to do, and this is tip number 2, is that we need something to help us push this drill into this steel. Now, in my other video where I showed you how to drill steel with a cordless drill, I used a clamp around the opposite way so it expanded and opened. And this one, I've got even a better idea for those people that don't even own a clamp. This is a simple little trick. Just measure from the windowsill to the underside of the drill with it in place, and then with 2 pieces of timber, cut one of them that length minus the thickness of the other piece of timber. That means both of them added together would add up to the same as the measurement you've just taken. The cut length can be used as a vertical prop from the windowsill, and the other as a lever arm to help push the underside of the drill. Whoop. Well, that wouldn't happen in real life because everything would be tied together. And that was amazingly quick. That was only about 30 seconds of drilling. In fact, what I'm going to do, just to show you, is I'll do another one without any editing, and you'll see how quick it is. So I can't really tell how long that was, but I'm sure it's less than a minute. So once that is through the steel, then back to the masonry bit, just for a final quick hole through the block, I think. Then I can I'm going to use a nice big raw plug in this one. Now that is a really good fixing through the plasterboard, through the steel and into the block above. That is not going to shift. I could even put my weight on that. Careful. Well, I hope you've enjoyed this video and it's given you some information for the next time you have to drill into something like this. Remember, go and have a look at our Patreon page where you can help support the channel, and I will see you next time.